You can say a lot of things about Joe Biden. You can't say he's godless. He has a very, very deep faith.
He is, as we keep pointing out, a religious man, a man of deep faith.
Yeah, people forget he's a Catholic. He's a man of deep faith.
So there you have it. The media tells us who is a devout Catholic. The real struggle is that the media would call people who protest at prayerfully protest at an abortion clinic, call them extremists or terrorists. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to dissect and maybe unpack some of the statements that President Biden made regarding March 31st as Transgender Awareness Day, which happened to fall on Easter of 2024. So first and foremost, happy Easter to all of you in this blessed Easter season. We know that Christ has risen. He is indeed truly risen. And before we jump into it, I want to say thank you. And if you haven't done so, to all of our sponsors and supporters, make sure you click like, subscribe, share, and comment, and also consider supporting us on our Patreon community, where we continue to dish out more information and provide you with some incredible perks that's going to help provide formation. That is information unpacked and pastorally and theologically applied so that we can kind of live our life peacefully in this crazy, crazy world. So let's just jump right into it with an understanding of the Catholic Church's view on this strange proclamation of Transgender Awareness Day that just happened to fall on Easter. Let's jump right into it with my comments on faith. We know that Easter falls on a different Sunday every year. And it's interesting because Easter Sunday can be early and it can be kind of late. In 2024, I would say that it was a perfect time. It was right before April 1st, April Fool's Day, at the end of March, and hopefully you had a beautiful celebration. It is in this moment that we experience a transfiguration of Christ. So, we experience the transfiguration on the mountain that Peter, James, and John experienced. But even after the resurrection, Jesus' experience of life changed. That's why the disciples didn't fully recognize him. So the resurrection isn't just about someone coming out of a grave, because that would be like a horror film. And if you haven't watched my Easter Saturday episode, make sure you jump into it, because it helps to unpack a little bit more about what the resurrection really means and why don't we understand it, and all the stuff about Easter that people have diminished about it, making it more commercial and Easter bunnies. But in this regard, the idea of trans, which means kind of movement or change, direction, like transportation, it's the movement from one place to the other. Transfiguration means that the outside image of Christ changed, but not in the same way a transgender experiences a change. You see, in the resurrection, Jesus' soul becomes vivified, animated, eternal. So, unlike the people Jesus raised from the dead, whether it be Lazarus or the daughter of the guard who was raised from the dead with that Talitha cum kind of proclamation, rise up, little girl, those two people are going to eventually die. Jesus, however, is not going to die. Jesus will live forever. And why? Because in the resurrection, his soul becomes manifested in a way that we see who he really is. The transgender community, however, would say that their souls, if someone was born a woman, a girl, they say that I was, however, born with a female body, but with a male soul. And they believe that getting a surgery, hormone blockers, and changing their name and their outside look corresponds to that. And that is unfortunately not up to them to decide what their soul is. Now, you can say it, but that doesn't make it true, because that soul is given by God. And therefore, one has to be more connected to who they are on the inside as God created them. And we know in the book of Genesis, we know that God created them male and female. He didn't create them as non-binary, and certainly didn't create them as confusion. Now, for a Catholic, however, we want to always be compassionate to people who do experience gender dysphoria. And that's why we actually have science that backs this up. We look at the very essence of a person, their chromosome, their very genetics, their body type and cell structure. We know that there is a distinction. And therefore, we believe that as Catholics, that while we always know that there is only male and female, there can sometimes be confusion in people's minds. So we've got to be compassionate to them. But that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And unfortunately, the culture is confused. So now I want to do is jump right into a comment on culture, especially as it refers to what President Biden did in his kind of more official proclamation of Transgender Awareness Day. Here's my comments on culture. We know that as Catholics, we are always proud when someone who is Catholic rises to prominence. And there have been two Catholic presidents, John F. Kennedy and now President Lyndon Biden. And anyone can claim that he is a good Catholic. You know, Father James Martin, for example, really supports President Biden's many initiatives. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. There is an idea of what it means to actually be a Catholic. And being a Catholic, you know, according to the Catechism, is someone who believes in the Catholic Church and builds up the kingdom of God, participates in all of the sacraments, and lives a life worthy of Jesus Christ, which basically means that we follow Jesus's teachings. Interestingly enough, people have all kind of commented and talked about President Biden's deep faith. I just wanted you to take a look at this video, for example, that kind of refers to him as a man of deep faith. But I also think that this is used as a matter of convenience. Check this out.
You can say a lot of things about Joe Biden. You can't say he's godless. He has a very, very deep faith.
He is, as we keep pointing out, a religious man, a man of deep faith.
Yeah, people forget he's a Catholic. He's a man of deep faith.
Joe Biden, of course, a man of deep faith.
This is a man who lives his faith.
Biden also credits faith to keeping him going.
Yeah, he's a very devout Catholic.
Biden, a devout Catholic.
He's well known to be a devout Catholic.
Joe Biden is a devout Catholic.
Joe Biden is a devout Catholic.
A very devout Catholic.
Devout Catholic.
Devout Catholic.
Devout Catholic.
Devout Catholic.
Joe Biden is a devout Catholic.
Oh, by the way, a devout Catholic. He went to Mass.
And he's going to go to church.
He went to church yesterday morning. The devout Catholic Biden was attending Mass.
In his right hand, from his pants pocket, he removed some rosary beads.
We talked about this briefly before, but let's reflect on it a little bit more. Joe Biden, a faithful Catholic, a devout Catholic, and he's not afraid to show it.
So there you have it. The media tells us who is a devout Catholic. The real struggle is that the media would call people who protest at abortion, prayerfully protest at an abortion clinic, call them extremists or terrorists. And in fact, there have been congressional acts that sent the FBI to try to investigate them and even, in some cases arrested them for simply being pro-life and being someone who doesn't agree with what is a definition of a good Catholic. You can see the confusion is very real. What exactly is a good Catholic? Because a good Catholic is someone who would certainly love their neighbor. We are told to do that and told not to judge. Mark 12, for example, talks about loving your neighbor as yourself. And in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, we hear how we're not called to judge one another lest we ourselves will be judged. But in this case, we have to maybe fully understand what's going on in the news, because I think there is some misinformation about declaring March 31st or that Sunday of Easter as Transgender Awareness Day. So let's get right into it, because this comes from the actual news source of who actually started the Transgender Day of Visibility, the Day of Visibility. Here we go. So this is actually a day by Rachel Crandall Crocker, the creator of International Transgender Day of Visibility, wanted people like himself, who now declares himself as a herself, as wanting to have a moment of happiness. A moment of happiness. So she made a Facebook post encouraging people to organize festivities in their own hometowns and started messaging accounts from all around the world. And this person said that it was just worth a shot. I'd been wanting there to be a special day for us for a long time. And this person, Rachel, recalled, and I was waiting and waiting for someone else to do it. And then finally I said, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to do it. So Crandall Crocker, who had lost a marriage when this person came out as a transgender, and also a job as a psychotherapist when Crandall transitioned, decided to create a day for herself and established March 31st as Transgender Day of Visibility. So, in a sense, it wasn't really aimed for Easter Sunday, 2024, because remember, Easter Day changes throughout the time. But what I'm frustrated about as a priest who is trying to not mix politics and culture, because I think people do it all the time. And they'll actually accuse me of being too political because I say something that politics has kind of taken over. I'm sorry, issues like this should not be political. They just shouldn't be. They are very personal, and it should be dealt with personally. However, people just seem to want to have affirmation. You heard it. Crandall mentioned that they just wanted that this person, I mean, to be honest with you, it's so hard to figure out which pronoun to use. I'm frustrated. Crandall is a he, because everything points to this person as being a he. But I want to respect how this person identifies. Doesn't mean that I agree with it. And that's the real struggle. I'm going to get more into it in my commentary. But in regards to a person's gender dysphoria and wanting to be happy, one might say, just let them do what they want to do. But now it's being forced on everybody else. It's almost like their visibility is in front of everyone else's. And in this year, 2024, it happened to fall on an Easter Sunday. I want to read to you I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs of this official proclamation of Transgender Visibility Day 2024. Here's what it says from the White House, signed by President Biden himself. On Transgender Day of Visibility, we honor the extraordinary courage and contribution of transgender Americans and reaffirm the nation's commitment to forming a more perfect union where all people are created equal and treated equally throughout their lives. Quick comment on that. I honestly don't know what the courage is. What is the courageous act? I mean, what actually has been done? I'm not saying that these are terrible people. I just want to know what exactly is the courageous act that they've done. Is it simply coming out? If that's what courageous means, then I guess I'm a courageous person too, because I came out as a sinner wanting to become a saint. But I don't necessarily have a day ascribed to me. I just simply realize that not everything has to be about me. That's the real struggle, is that everything seems to be rooted in the mentality that everyone should get a trophy because a trophy is going to make people happy. And a day to recognize who you are is going to make you happy. I'm sorry, these are fleeting things. It's going to last 24 hours. But what doesn't last for 24 hours, but for a lifetime, is God. And that's Jesus Christ's resurrection. So Crandall wanted to make a day for him/herself, as Crandall now identifies. Just happened to fall on Easter Sunday 2024. And it seems that President Biden seemed to think that this was more important than celebrating Easter. Why? Because he'll say the following: I'm proud that my administration has stood for justice from the start, working to ensure that LGBTQIA+, so that just leaves open to everyone, community can live openly and in safety and in dignity and respect. I just know that people who might not agree with this unfortunately are not safe. They are not treated with dignity and not treated with respect. I mean, I just take a look at people who are politically imprisoned right now. There is injustice on the other side. Now, has the trans community experienced, or the LGBTQIA plus community experienced bullying? Yeah, they have. But guess what? They do it to themselves sometimes. My goodness. I mean, I've unfortunately seen some shows where they're just vicious to each other. So guess what? Bullying doesn't need government protection. It needs someone to stand up to them. And if they are voiceless, then you can take it to the courts. But by making these proclamations official from the highest office of the land seems to create this special interest group. I mean, that anyone right now can just simply identify as trans and they'll be afforded unique protections. And so he continues, I'm proud to have appointed transgender leaders to my administration. And to be honest with you, here's my comment. So what? I don't really care about how they identify. I care more importantly about how they do their job. And in some cases, I haven't seen a good job from it. And also openly in the military. I'm proud to have signed historic executive orders that strengthen civil rights protection in housing, employment, healthcare, education, the justice system, and more. And that's fine. Good for you. But what about our veterans who are homeless as well? What protections do we give to them? What support do we give to them? Continues that whether serving in communities or military, they deserve and are entitled to. By the way, I'm condensing because these are long paragraphs. And they're, to be honest with you, somewhat cringy because it's almost like making someone who is trans the ultimate victim of hatred. And I just don't see that as true. I think they might see themselves as full victims, as the victims who experienced the most suffering in their life. But compared to Jesus Christ, I doubt it. Compared to Christians who were martyred, certainly not. Any type of bullying is terrible. But listen to this. So they deserve and are entitled to the same rights and freedoms as every other American, including the most fundamental freedoms to be their true selves. Again, here is where being your true self is somewhat subjective, but there is a ton of objectivity, namely your biology, your chromosomes, your whole genetic makeup. So come on, we cannot let someone claim something because their mind tells them to. You know, children, again, now are identifying as furries, as cats. You know, when I was a kid, I identified as a superhero. But that wasn't my true identity because it wasn't rooted in full reality. But then here's where it gets kind of cringy, because now their accusations come. But extremists are proposing hundreds of hateful laws that target and terrify transgender kids and their families, silencing teachers, banning books, and even threatening parents, doctors, and nurses with prison for helping parents get care for their children. So in other words, people who disagree with the transgender community are now considered extremists and hateful. That's where we are right now. And so this is another full paragraph. And it says, by the way, there was more to that paragraph that I read. At the same time, my administration is working hard to stop the bullying and harassment of transgender children and their families. The Department of Justice has taken action to push back against extreme and un-American state law targeting transgender youth and their families, and the Department of Justice is partnering with law enforcement and community groups to combat hate and violence. You can see we are really creating a very, very unique status and class of protection for someone who identifies as transgender. And do they need our protection? To some degree, I mean, if you want to stop bullying. But guess what? When someone disagrees with the transgender movement, now they're going to be considered hateful. This is the struggle that I have. That on a day that commemorates Christ's resurrection, and by the way, that resurrection meant anyone who identified as a Christian would have been killed for their faith for 300 years. Now in 2024, we know that there are actually more Christian martyrs today in this year alone than there were in the first 300 years. In this century, we've had more Christian martyrs because they identify as Christian. They were killed for identifying as a follower of Christ than in the first 300 years in the age of martyrdom. Let that sink in, because while there were, again, I'm going to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs from Transgender Awareness Day, our Catholic president writes this about Easter Sunday 2024. Jill and I send our warmest wishes to Christians around the world celebrating Easter Sunday. Easter reminds us of the power of hope and the promise of Christ's resurrection. As we gather with loved ones, we remember Jesus' sacrifice. We pray for one another and cherish the blessing of the dawn of new possibilities. And with wars and conflict taking a toll on innocent lives around the world, we renew our commitment to work for peace, security, and dignity for all people. From our family to yours, happy Easter, and may God bless you. There were two sentences in the first paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the second paragraph, and one last statement. You can see the more words, the more important. And in this case, I don't see anything wrong with this message. I'm perfectly fine. I do see that it opens up the idea of the resurrection to mean more than what it really means. It means Jesus rose from the dead, talking about new possibilities. What exactly are those new possibilities? I mean, if new possibilities mean smart cities, I don't want it. If the possibilities mean that we continue to codify confusion as something normal, I don't agree to it. But then it says, and with wars and conflict taking a toll on innocent lives around the world, we know that that's happening. But who's funding these wars? And what has been done to try to stop it? Again, this is not a political statement. This is a moral observation on a public person who claims to be a good Catholic. And it says we renew our commitment to work for peace, security, and the dignity for all people. Does all people include unborn children and people who disagree with you or with me? Look, I don't like it when people disagree with me. But we also know that perhaps there might be a moment of truth. And so when asked about this, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, who I have my personal opinions about the kind of job this person is doing. It seems to me like every time I watch the news and I hear the press secretary try to respond to questions, that it's really not an answer. It's kind of like a diminishing the question because it was just kind of eye-rolling. A stupid question, and I can't believe you asked something like this. But in this case, when asked about it, the press secretary said that Joe Biden Devout Catholic Joe Biden also banned, let me go back real quick. They asked also about how on Easter Sunday during the egg rolling competition that there was a ban on any religious symbol, so no crosses. So, on Easter Sunday, the President of the United States made it about eggs rather than rising from the dead, and no crosses or any religious symbols should be presented. So when asked about it, the press secretary said, so surprised by the misinformation that's been out there. Every year for the past several years, on March 31st, Transgender Day of Visibility is marked. And then KGP continued to kind of make a comment about Christians, said, as you know, Easter falls on different Sundays, and this year it happened to coincide with Transgender Visibility Day. And so it's that simple fact. That's what has happened. That's where we are. In other words, that's true. Easter Sunday does change. It happened to coincide on that day. But you can see that there's more importance attributed to one than the other. That's all there is to it. So let me jump into my comments. Here we go. So my commentary is this. 1, what should Christians do about this? Number one, I don't think we need to care. I mean, like, the government proclaims so many things, I can't keep up with it. If you look at a calendar, there's like a day for cupcakes. There's a day for dogs with, ugly dogs. There's a day for, pink bow ties. Who cares? Don't celebrate it. But as a Catholic, here's what you need to do. Celebrate the Christian holidays with more gusto. That's all there is to it. Celebrate our Catholic feast days and our saints with more gusto. Make sure that these days don't just fall by the wayside, so that government then starts replacing our religious holidays with secular, strange, weird, silly, non-serious holidays. So number one, practice your faith more profoundly and with more enthusiasm, as well as the feast days. I love our feast days, so take advantage of feasting on our feast days. The second thing you want to do is ask yourself in prayer, how do I respect people who are different from me? Do I need a government agency to support that? No, you don't. So just ask yourself, how are you going to love your neighbor as yourself? These are very basic things. Thirdly, if you are a person who experiences gender dysphoria or have experienced bullying, like me when I was a kid growing up, I was bullied for being a little Filipino brown boy. Guess what? Here's my recommendation. Deal with it. Grow thicker skin through prayer, as well as associating with people who are going to affirm your true identity, which must be rooted in Christ. So being more rooted and identifying with Christ is going to help you with this, because remember, he experienced the suffering that no one else experienced in the entire world's history. And yet he rose above it all, and he showed who he truly is on the outside from who he is on the inside. The problem is many people are confused on their inside. And that is so true based on so many transgender people being very conflicted, going through transition, and then regretting it. There are more of them than there are people who are just happy with their transition. If you just look on the internet, you're going to see, the internet suppresses those videos and those feeds, but they are truly there of people who regret their transition because they were confused, especially at a young age. And so it does require us to make sure that we let everyone know who they are as rooted in Christ. There is so much confusion. I don't want people to get angry about this to the president, but that also means we don't have to agree with him. And if this particular president seems to support values that are not in line with your Christian views, then that's going to be between you and the polling, your voting. And I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm just saying you have to pay attention to what the fruits are of this particular administration. Are they in line with his Catholic identity, with his Catholic faith, as everyone claims? And we have to know that there is certainly a lot of hypocrisy. They love saying that he's a devout Catholic, and therefore he supports killing unborn children. It's kind of confusing, isn't it? So it requires us to, again, be strong in our Catholic awareness. Don't get mad about these things. I'm sure it's frustrating. I'm frustrated by it too. But guess what? You don't have to care about any of it. Just care about what matters to you in your Catholic faith. And remember that when you pick up your cross and follow Jesus, you're going to become who you really are. You are called to be a saint. And saints are not confused about who they are as God created them. I hope this certainly helps. Thank you for watching and being a part of it. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, as well as support us on our Patreon community so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you. Happy Easter season to you all, and stay hungry for God.
Bye.